Bengals fans, something important is starting to take shape in Cincinnati, and as mandatory minicamp gets underway, there is one question hanging over this team that could end up defining a huge part of what happens next. The Bengals have spent the offseason making additions, reshaping key areas of the roster, and creating new competition across the defensive front. But now comes the part that matters most. The moves have been made. The names are in the building. The excitement is growing. The real question is how all of these pieces will fit together once the team takes the field. Before we go any further, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to stay updated on everything happening around the Cincinnati Bengals. With minicamp beginning and important storylines developing every day, this is exactly the time to stay locked in so you don't miss any major updates. Now, let's get to what matters. As the Bengals move from voluntary off-season work into mandatory minicamp, one of the biggest discussions surrounding the team centers on the defensive line. According to the materials surrounding the start of minicamp, the major question being asked is simple. How will Cincinnati use its new additions? It's a fair question. The Bengals did not spend this offseason sitting still. Instead, they focused heavily on improving the defensive front and strengthening the pass rush. Several names have generated attention, but the conversation starts with defensive tackle Dexter Lawrence, who is described as a major off-season addition for Cincinnati. However, the discussion does not stop there. The Bengals also added Jonathan Allen and edge rusher Boy Mayfield, creating what many hope will become a significantly improved defensive unit. When fans talk about the offseason, Dexter Lawrence naturally receives a lot of attention. His arrival has become one of the most discussed topics around the team. Boy Mafe has also generated excitement because of what he potentially brings to the edge rushing group. But there is another player who may not be receiving quite as much attention despite being an important addition. That player is Jonathan Allen. The discussion surrounding Allen is particularly interesting because he seems to have become somewhat overlooked amid the excitement surrounding the other acquisitions. Yet the details presented about his arrival suggest he could play a very important role in what the Bengals are trying to build defensively. Allen reportedly joined Cincinnati on a 2-year contract worth $25 million and arrives with the background of being a former 2-time Pro Bowler. There has been debate surrounding the move. Some viewpoints suggest Allen was one of the more underrated signings of the offseason, while others have questioned whether Cincinnati paid too much at the position, especially considering the later addition of Dexter Lawrence. But one detail stands out. The Bengals made the decision to bring in Jonathan Allen before Dexter Lawrence entered the picture. At that point, Cincinnati still had multiple possible paths available to improve the defensive tackle position. Yet, they chose Allen because they believed he could help upgrade an area they wanted to strengthen. That context matters. Initially, Allen looked like he might become the primary addition leading the interior defensive front. Now, however, the situation has changed dramatically. Instead of carrying that responsibility alone, he is expected to work alongside Dexter Lawrence. The result is a pairing that could potentially create opportunities for both players to be even more effective than originally anticipated. When people evaluate off-season additions, they often focus on individual talent. But football is rarely that simple. Sometimes the most important aspect is how players complement one another. The discussion entering minicamp suggests that Cincinnati's coaching staff now faces the challenge of maximizing the combination of Lawrence, Allen, Mayfield, and the rest of the defensive front. And that's exactly why the question being asked is so important. The Bengals appear to have invested heavily in creating a stronger pass rush. They have assembled multiple pieces. Now the focus shifts toward execution. How will these players work together? How will responsibilities be divided? How will the defensive line rotation look? How will the coaching staff put each player in the best position to succeed? Those are the questions that minicamp may begin to answer. The excitement surrounding the defensive line doesn't stop with the veteran additions either. Another major storyline involves the younger edge rushers already on the roster. Myles Murphy and Shamar Stewart are both mentioned as ascending players, and their development could become a major factor in determining the overall ceiling of the defense. The additions of Boy Mayfield and Cam Sample create even more competition and depth within the group, giving Cincinnati several options as they continue shaping the defensive front. Among those names, Shamar Stewart has emerged as one of the most intriguing players to watch. In fact, he was highlighted as a potential breakout candidate entering the 2026 season. The reasoning behind that prediction centers on the belief that Stewart could take a significant step forward after receiving praise during off-season work. The discussion suggests that coaches and players alike have noticed positive developments, and even Boy Mayfield reportedly had encouraging things to say regarding Stewart's potential. That possibility changes the conversation, because while much of the attention is naturally focused on new additions, an internal breakout can be just as valuable. Think about it. If Lawrence performs at a high level, Allen contributes as expected, Mayfield strengthens the edge group, and Stewart takes a noticeable leap forward, suddenly the entire outlook of the defensive front changes. The impact would go far beyond a single position group. It could affect the defense as a whole. Of course, Stewart's path has not been completely smooth. The discussion around him references multiple factors that affected the beginning of his career, including injuries and contract-related issues. Those circumstances created challenges and prevented the ideal start that both player and team likely envisioned. However, entering this off-season, the outlook appears different. According to the information discussed, Stewart has been present during voluntary activities and is reportedly in a better position than he was previously. There is no mention of the same contract-related distractions, and there appears to be optimism surrounding his development heading into the future. What's particularly interesting is how expectations are being framed. The focus isn't necessarily on massive sack totals or comparing Stewart to some of the biggest stars at the position. Instead, the emphasis is on making an impact whenever he is on the field. The belief appears to be that Stewart can contribute within the role he is given and provide meaningful production when opportunities arise. That may ultimately be one of the most realistic and important goals for his development. Not every player needs to dominate every snap. Not every player needs to carry the defense. Sometimes growth is measured by consistency, effectiveness, and the ability to capitalize on opportunities. If Stewart can accomplish those things, the Bengals may feel very good about where he is headed. Beyond the defensive line discussion, there is another takeaway from the off-season work leading into minicamp. Surprisingly, there do not appear to be major depth chart changes taking place right now. After reviewing position battles and roster competitions, the conclusion presented is that no player has clearly forced a significant reshuffling of the depth chart at this stage. No obvious starter appears to have lost a job. No backup appears to have dramatically jumped into a higher role. No major surprises have emerged from the voluntary portion of the off-season. At first glance, some fans might view that as disappointing. After all, off-season practices often generate excitement when an unexpected player starts turning heads. But there is another way to look at it. Stability can be a positive sign. The belief expressed is that Cincinnati appears relatively settled across much of the roster. Instead of entering minicamp with major uncertainty at numerous positions, the Bengals seem to have a fairly clear understanding of where things stand. That doesn't mean competition is over. Far from it. Minicamp still represents an important opportunity for players to strengthen their cases, improve their standing, and demonstrate why they deserve larger roles. But the overall picture suggests that Cincinnati has entered this phase of the offseason with a roster structure that already feels more established. And that brings us back to the original question. How will the Bengals use their new additions? Because as minicamp begins, that remains the storyline tying everything together. The organization has assembled talent across the defensive front. Dexter Lawrence is expected to be a major piece. Jonathan Allen brings experience and proven production. Boy Mayfield adds another dimension to the edge-rushing group. Shamar Stewart is attempting to take the next step in his development. Myles Murphy remains part of the conversation. The pieces are there. Now the focus shifts toward building the complete picture. The next few days of mandatory minicamp may not answer every question, but they should provide a clearer look at how Cincinnati intends to deploy these players and what the defensive identity could begin to look like moving forward. For Bengals fans, that makes this one of the most important storylines to follow as the off-season continues. The roster additions generated excitement. The expectations are growing. And now everyone wants to see how those expectations translate onto the field. What do you think, Bengals fans? Which addition are you most excited to watch during minicamp? Do you believe Jonathan Allen is being overlooked? And how big of a leap do you expect from Shamar Stewart this season? Let me know your thoughts, and let's keep the conversation going. Who dey?